It's 3:47 a.m. and you're awake again. Not because of a nightmare, because you felt it. That pull in your chest. That knowing they're awake too, maybe thinking about you, maybe not. And here's the part that makes you feel insane. You can't explain this to anyone. They'd say you're obsessed, that you need to move on, that it's been months. But they don't feel what you feel. They don't know that being an empath in love with someone impossible isn't heartbreak. It's haunting. They're living their life right now. Maybe dating someone new. Maybe they haven't thought about you in weeks, and you're still feeling them in your body like they're in the room with you. Still sensing their moods from across the city. Still carrying their emotional weight while they've moved on like you never happened. And the worst part? You can't tell anyone this without sounding completely crazy. You've tried everything, haven't you? You've done the meditations, cut the cords, burned the sage, deleted every photo, blocked them everywhere. You've tried dating other people to prove you're over it. You've thrown yourself into work, into friends, into anything that might make you stop feeling them. And none of it worked. Because 2 weeks later, you're awake at 3 a.m. again with their name in your throat and their energy in your chest, and you're starting to believe you'll never be free of this. And here's the thought you've had that you're most ashamed of. Maybe you're broken. Maybe there's something fundamentally wrong with how you're wired. Maybe other people can love and let go because they're normal, and you're just too much. Too sensitive, too intense, too damaged to ever have a relationship that doesn't destroy you. You've started wondering if you should just accept that love isn't meant for people like you. That maybe you're supposed to be alone because your heart doesn't work like everyone else's. And that thought? That's the one that wakes you up crying, not missing them. Missing the version of yourself who still believed your capacity to feel everything was a gift instead of a curse. Here's what nobody tells you. Everything you've been taught about moving on, about closure, about cutting cords and building walls, it doesn't work for someone like you. Those strategies were designed for people who connect at surface levels, people who can simply decide to stop loving someone and have their nervous system actually comply. But your empathic system doesn't work that way. You're still plugged into them, still receiving their frequency. And until you understand the specific way empaths must approach healing, you'll stay trapped in this nightmare while everyone around you wonders why you can't just get over it already. Carl Jung spent decades working with people exactly like you. Empaths who came to him completely destroyed by impossible love, still feeling someone who was gone, still carrying emotional weight that was never entirely theirs to begin with. And what he discovered will change everything for you. He found that empaths don't heal by trying to forget. They heal by consciously transforming the energetic entanglement, by retrieving the pieces of themselves they unconsciously gave away, by learning to direct the profound love they offered to someone unavailable back toward the one person who's been waiting for it all along, themselves. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to stop feeling them in your body even when they're gone, how to retrieve the pieces of yourself you didn't know you gave away, how to transform the cord that's been draining you into something that actually frees you, and most importantly, how to finally love yourself the way you've been loving them, so you never again confuse intensity with intimacy or potential with reality. This isn't about forgetting them. This is about remembering yourself. Comment below the exact time you woke up last night thinking about them. Just the time. Nothing else. Because I want you to see you're not alone in this 3 a.m. club that nobody talks about. Carl Jung discovered something that explains why you can't just move on the way everyone keeps telling you to. He found that empaths form what he called psychic imprints, energetic signatures of the people they've loved deeply that remain active in their consciousness long after the relationship ends. This isn't you being dramatic. This isn't you unable to let go. This is your empathic system doing exactly what it was designed to do, maintaining connection to someone your soul recognized as significant. Let me tell you what's actually happening in your body right now. When you loved this person, you didn't just connect to their personality or behavior. You connected to their essence. Your nervous system learned their emotional frequency like a radio station you can't turn off. Your heart attuned to their energetic signature. Your consciousness created pathways that allow you to sense them, feel them, know things about them that logic can't explain. And when they left, these pathways didn't just disappear. They're still transmitting, still receiving, still trying to maintain a connection that no longer exists in physical reality. This is why you wake at 3 in the morning flooded with emotions that aren't yours. Why certain songs don't just remind you of them. They trigger something visceral in your body, like your cells are still holding the imprint of a connection that's gone. Why you can feel when they're thinking about you even though you haven't spoken in months. Why you sometimes sense their emotional state with such clarity that it feels like you're still energetically sitting in the same room with them. Jung called this phenomenon psychic bleeding, where the boundaries between your emotional experience and theirs remain permeable long after they've gone. And here's what makes it unbearable. They're not feeling this. They don't wake up at 3 a.m. sensing you. They don't feel the pull. The connection is one way now and you're the one still plugged in while they've completely unplugged from you. Most advice about healing tells you to cut contact, distract yourself, focus on other things. Delete their number, unfollow them, stop checking their social media. And you've done all of that, haven't you? You've blocked them everywhere. You've removed every reminder. You've tried to erase them from your physical reality. But it didn't work. Because Jung understood something that modern psychology completely misses. For empaths, these external strategies don't address the internal reality of continued energetic entanglement. You can block their number and delete their photos. But if you haven't consciously transformed the psychic imprint they left in your system, you're still bound to them in ways that physical distance can't resolve. You're still energetically available to someone who is no longer energetically available to you. And that's not just painful. It's exhausting. It's draining your life force every single day. Jung found that empaths who try to heal by forcing disconnection often experience what he called phantom attachment syndrome. You go through all the motions of moving on. You date other people. You build a new life. You convince yourself you're over it. But there's a part of you that remains frozen in the moment they left, still waiting, still hoping, still unable to fully inhabit your present reality because you're energetically tethered to a past that won't release its hold on you. And here's the secret nobody's telling you. The cord between you isn't staying active because they're holding on to you. It's staying active because you're unconsciously using it to avoid facing something in yourself that their absence is asking you to finally address. The first step in healing isn't cutting the cord. It's understanding why the cord formed in the first place and what it's actually made of. Because Jung discovered something that will change how you see this entire situation. The psychic imprints empaths carry aren't just about the other person. They're about what the other person activated in you, what parts of yourself you were finally able to express in their presence, what you were unconsciously trying to heal through loving them. Think about who you became when you were with this person, not who they wanted you to be, but who you allowed yourself to be. Were you more creative, more emotionally honest, more vulnerable, more alive? Here's what Jung would tell you. You weren't falling in love with them. You were falling in love with the version of yourself that felt safe enough to emerge in their presence. And when they left, you didn't just lose them. You lost access to the parts of yourself that only felt permission to exist when they were witnessing you. This is why healing feels so impossible. You're not just grieving a person. You're grieving the death of the self you became in their reflection. You're mourning the loss of feeling seen, understood, recognized at depths you'd never experienced before. You're aching for the version of you that their presence called forth, the aspects of your soul that finally had space to breathe when someone was paying attention. Jung called this projected wholeness, where we unconsciously use other people as permission slips to access parts of ourselves we haven't learned to access independently. And for empaths, this projection happens at such profound depths that when the person leaves, it genuinely feels like they took pieces of you with them, because in a psychological sense they did. Not because they stole anything, but because you placed your own disowned aspects into their care and now you don't know how to retrieve them. Maybe you were funnier with them, more spontaneous, more sensual, more brave, more yourself than you'd ever been with anyone. And now that they're gone, those parts of you feel gone too. You're back to being the version of yourself that existed before them, and it feels like regression, like you've lost something precious that you'll never get back. But here's what Jung understood that changes everything. Those parts of you aren't gone. They're not lost. They didn't leave with this person. They're still inside you, waiting for you to learn how to access them without needing someone else's presence to give you permission. If you're recognizing this pattern, if you're understanding that what you're missing isn't just them but the version of yourself that existed in their presence, comment below with just the word retrieval. Because Jung believed that naming what we're actually grieving is the beginning of conscious healing. You're not trying to get them back. You're trying to get yourself back. Carl Jung developed a practice that he rarely shared publicly, something he used with empaths who were trapped in the aftermath of impossible love. He called it conscious cord transformation, and it's completely different from the violent cord-cutting rituals that most spiritual teachers recommend. Jung understood that for empaths, trying to sever energetic connections through force only creates psychic wounding that takes years to heal. Instead, he taught a process of conscious acknowledgement, gratitude, and retrieval that transforms the cord from a drain into a bridge back to yourself. Here's what Jung discovered about the cords empaths form. They're not one-dimensional. They're complex, multi-layered structures that carry different frequencies of connection. There's the cord of hope, still transmitting your longing for them to return. There's the cord of responsibility, still trying to manage their emotional well-being from a distance. There's the cord of unfinished business, still seeking the closure that never came. There's the cord of identity, still defining yourself through their perception of you. And beneath all of these, there's the deepest cord, the one that connects you to the parts of yourself you only learn to access through loving them. The transformation process Jung developed doesn't try to cut these cords all at once. It works with each layer individually, bringing consciousness to what each cord represents, what need it was trying to fulfill, what part of you is still feeding energy through it. Because here's what Jung found most important. The cords remain active not because the other person is holding on to you, but because you're unconsciously using them to avoid facing something in yourself that their absence is asking you to finally address. Let me walk you through the practice Jung used, and I want you to actually do this with me right now. Not just listen to it. Find a quiet space where you won't be interrupted for the next few minutes. Close your eyes and bring this person to mind, but not in the way you usually think about them. Don't focus on memories or conversations or what went wrong. Instead, simply feel into the energetic space between you. Notice where in your body you feel the connection most strongly. For most empaths, it's the solar plexus or the heart, but it could be anywhere. Just notice. Once you've located the feeling, Jung would ask you to visualize the cord that connects you to them. Don't force an image. Let it arise naturally. Some people see it as light, others as rope or chain, others as something more abstract like smoke or water. There's no right way to perceive it. Whatever appears is exactly what your unconscious needs to show you. Now here's the crucial part that separates Jung's approach from conventional cord cutting. Instead of immediately trying to sever the connection, he wants you to follow it. Trace the cord from your body to theirs, but pay attention to what you find along the way. What emotions are traveling through this cord right now? What are you still sending them? What are you still hoping to receive? What parts of yourself are you still trying to get them to validate, approve, acknowledge, love? Really feel into this. You might discover you're sending them apologies, or explanations, or proof that you're doing okay without them, or energy to support them even though they're gone, or hope that they'll realize what they lost, or love that has nowhere to go. Whatever you find traveling through the cord, just notice it without judgment. Jung found that when empaths actually examine their cords with consciousness instead of just trying to eliminate them, they discover something shocking. Most of what's traveling through the cord isn't about the other person at all. It's your own disowned needs, your own unexpressed emotions, your own abandoned parts trying to find a home in someone else because you haven't learned to hold them yourself. The transformation happens when you begin consciously calling back what you've been sending through the cord. And I want you to do this with me right now. Imagine taking back every ounce of hope, every plea for recognition, every attempt to make them understand, every wish for them to change, every bit of love you've been sending into a void. See all of that energy flowing back toward you, returning to the source where it belongs. Watch it come back like a river reversing its flow. Feel it returning to your body, filling up the places that have felt empty since they left. This isn't about bitterness or anger. This is about energetic sovereignty. This is about no longer draining yourself by trying to maintain a connection with someone who isn't available to receive what you're offering. As you call your energy back, notice how your body responds. Most empaths feel an immediate sense of relief, as if they've been holding tension they didn't know was there. You might feel like you can breathe deeper, like weight is lifting off your chest. Some feel grief, recognizing how much of their life force has been flowing outward instead of nourishing their own system. Others feel anger at how long they've been energetically available to someone who was never energetically available to them. Whatever comes up, just let it be there. But here's where Jung's practice becomes truly transformative. Once you've retrieved your energy from the cord, you don't cut it and you don't leave it dead. You transform it. You consciously shift its function from a cord of attachment to a cord of blessing. You allow it to remain as a thin golden thread that honors the connection while no longer feeding it with your life force. You transform it from a drain into a bridge that lets you access the lessons this person came to teach without remaining trapped in longing for them to be different than they are. Feel that transformation happening now. Watch the cord shift from whatever color or texture it was before into something lighter, thinner, more translucent. Not severed, not dead, just transformed into something that can exist without draining you. A connection that honors what was without demanding what can't be. Jung discovered that when empaths complete this transformation consciously, something remarkable happens. The obsessive thoughts quiet. The middle-of-the-night emotional surges decrease. The sense of being energetically pulled toward someone who isn't there begins to dissolve. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself through caring for someone who can't reciprocate. And here's what Jung found most beautiful about this practice. When you call your energy back from them, you don't just get your energy back, you get yourself back. The creative energy you were sending them, that's yours now to create with. The love you were sending them, that's yours now to direct toward yourself. The hope you were sending them, that's yours now to invest in your own becoming. This practice isn't one time. Jung recommended doing it regularly, especially in the early stages of healing, because empathic cords have a tendency to reactivate when you're tired, lonely, or vulnerable. Each time you notice yourself energetically reaching toward them again, and you will notice because you're becoming conscious now, you simply repeat the process. Call your energy back. Transform the cord. Return to yourself. If you just did that practice with me and you're feeling something shift, comment below with just the word sovereign. Because what you just did is the beginning of reclaiming your power from someone who no longer deserves access to it. Carl Jung identified something that will explain why healing has felt so impossible. He discovered that empaths who love someone unavailable aren't just dealing with current heartbreak. They're dealing with what he called layered abandonment, where the present rejection activates every instance of not being chosen that's stored in your cellular memory since childhood. This is why the pain feels so disproportionate to the actual relationship. You're not just grieving this person. You're grieving every time you've ever felt invisible, unworthy, too much, not enough. Let me tell you something about yourself that you've probably never connected before. When you were an empath as a child, you learned very early that your value came from how well you could attune to other people's needs. Maybe you had parents who were emotionally volatile, and you became hypervigilant to their moods to keep yourself safe. You learned to read the room before you even entered it. You learned to sense danger before it arrived. You learned to manage everyone else's emotions so yours could be ignored. Or maybe you had caregivers who were physically present but emotionally absent, and you learned to perform, achieve, or caretake to earn moments of attention. You became the funny one, the helpful one, the one who never caused problems. You learned that your needs were burdens and your feelings were inconvenient, so you stuffed them down and focused on making everyone else comfortable. Or maybe you grew up in chaos, addiction, mental illness, conflict, instability, and you became the one who absorbed everyone else's distress to create temporary peace. You became a sponge for pain that wasn't yours because if you could absorb it, maybe it would stop destroying your family. You learned to carry weight that was never meant for a child to carry. Whatever your specific story, Jung found a consistent pattern in empaths. You learned to outsource your sense of worth to how well you could make other people feel better. You developed your empathic abilities not as a gift but as a survival strategy. And this created a template where love became synonymous with work, effort, proving, performing, reading the room, managing emotions, anticipating needs, making yourself small so others could feel big. When you encountered this person you couldn't have, your unconscious mind recognized them as the perfect person to recreate this childhood dynamic. They were unavailable in exactly the ways your early caregivers were unavailable. They gave you just enough attention to keep you hoping but never enough to make you feel secure. They showed you glimpses of the depth you craved, but pulled away whenever you reached for more. And your empathic system, trained since childhood to believe that if you just try harder, feel deeper, understand better, you'll finally earn the love you deserve. It went into overdrive. You started doing what you always do. Reading their moods, anticipating their needs, adjusting your behavior to manage their comfort, making excuses for inconsistency, explaining away behavior that hurt, trying to love them into being available, trying to understand them into being capable, trying to give enough to finally be enough. Jung called this repetition compulsion, the psyche's desperate attempt to heal old wounds by recreating them in new relationships with the unconscious hope that this time, the outcome will be different. You weren't trying to make this person love you. You were unconsciously trying to prove that your love is enough to transform someone's capacity to be available. You were trying to rewrite the story where your childhood attunement and emotional labor weren't sufficient to make your parents consistently present. And it didn't work. Just like it didn't work when you were 5 or 10 or 15. Because here's what Jung understood that most people miss. You cannot love someone into wholeness. You cannot attune someone into availability. You cannot emotional labor someone into having the capacity to meet you. Their unavailability isn't about you. It's about them. Just like your parents' inability to attune to you wasn't about your worthiness. It was about their own limitations, their own wounds, their own lack of capacity. But your empathic system doesn't understand that yet. Your empathic system still believes that if you just try harder, you'll finally be chosen. If you just understand more deeply, you'll finally be seen. If you just give more, you'll finally receive. Because that's what you were taught. That's the template you've been running on since you were too young to question it. The healing Jung offers isn't about analyzing this pattern intellectually. It's about feeling it in your body. It's about letting yourself finally acknowledge the rage underneath all that compassionate understanding. The rage at being the one who always adjusts, accommodates, explains away behavior that hurts. The rage at making yourself responsible for other people's emotional capacity when you were just a child who needed someone to hold space for your emotions. And I need you to hear this. This rage is sacred. Jung believed that empaths can't heal until they allow themselves to feel the full force of their anger at how they've been trained to abandon themselves. Not anger at the person who couldn't be with you, though that might be part of it. But deeper anger at the programming that taught you your needs don't matter as much as your ability to meet other people's needs. Anger at learning to love everyone except yourself. Anger at being conditioned to believe that your empathic gifts obligate you to accept less than you deserve. Most empaths are terrified of their own anger because they've been taught that anger makes them unlovable, difficult, too much. But Jung found that the empaths who heal most completely are the ones who give themselves permission to feel furious about how they've been treating themselves, about how long they've been making excuses for people who don't show up, about how many years they've spent trying to earn love instead of expecting it as their birthright. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you let yourself feel genuinely angry? Not irritated, not frustrated, but full body, shaking with it rage at how you've been conditioning yourself to accept crumbs while calling it love. When was the last time you let yourself feel furious that you've been giving 5-star treatment to people who barely give you 1 star in return? The healing practice Jung developed around this is simple, but profound. He called it the grief behind the grief. You sit with the heartbreak of losing this person, and instead of trying to understand them or make sense of why they couldn't be with you, you ask yourself a different question. How old does this pain feel? Really sit with that. How old does this abandonment feel? When have you felt this exact flavor of rejection before? What age are you when you drop into this pain? And then you let yourself drop beneath the story about this adult relationship into the original wound. You let yourself feel what it was like to be small and powerless, needing someone to see you and having them look right through you, needing someone to choose you and watching them choose everything else instead, needing someone to celebrate your sensitivity and having them tell you it's too much, you're too much, you need to calm down, stop being so emotional, toughen up. Feel that. Feel what it was like to be a child who could sense everything but couldn't protect yourself from what you were sensing. To know when your parents were angry before they said anything but have no power to stop what was coming. To feel your mother's sadness like a weight in your own chest, but be told you're making things up. To absorb your father's stress and your siblings' pain and your family's dysfunction, and then be told you're too sensitive, too dramatic, imagining things. You learn to doubt your own perception because the adults around you denied what you were sensing. You learn to not trust yourself because your empathic hits were labeled as overreactions. You learned that your gift was actually a burden, and if you wanted to be loved, you needed to stop feeling so much, stop caring so much, stop being so much. And somewhere along the way, you made a decision. A child's decision that became your blueprint for love. You decided, if I can just make them comfortable enough, calm enough, happy enough, they'll finally have space to see me. If I can just manage their emotions well enough, they'll finally have capacity to care about mine. If I can just be less needy, less emotional, less intense, I'll finally be lovable. That decision has been running your life ever since. And this person you couldn't have? They walked right into that blueprint and activated every bit of it. They became the latest version of your attempt to prove that if you just love someone hard enough, understand them deeply enough, give them enough space and patience and compassion, they'll finally choose you. They'll finally see you. They'll finally stay. And they didn't. Just like your parents didn't. Just like all the others before them didn't. Not because you weren't enough, but because you were trying to heal a childhood wound through an adult relationship. And that's not how healing works. Jung found that when empaths finally grieve the original abandonment instead of just the current one, something shifts at the foundational level. You stop taking this person's unavailability personally because you recognize it's not about you. It was never about you. They couldn't show up not because you weren't enough, but because their own wounds made them incapable of receiving the quality of love you were offering. Just like your parents' inability to attune to you wasn't about your worthiness. It was about their limitations, their wounds, their lack of capacity. You could have been the most perfect child in the world, and it wouldn't have changed their ability to see you, because they weren't looking. Not because you weren't there, but because they couldn't see past their own pain. This recognition doesn't eliminate the pain, but it transforms its meaning. You're no longer trying to heal by getting this person to change. You're healing by finally giving yourself what no one else gave you. The message that you deserve to be chosen, seen, celebrated, held, not because you earned it through empathic labor, but simply because you existed. If this is landing, if you're feeling the grief behind the grief rising in your body, let it come. Don't try to make sense of it or organize it or explain it. Just let yourself feel what you needed to feel decades ago but couldn't because you had to survive. Comment below with just the word witnessed, because sometimes the deepest healing happens when we allow ourselves to be seen in our grief by people who understand. Carl Jung discovered that the turning point in an empath's healing comes when they stop trying to recover the person they were before this love and start becoming someone they've never been. Someone who has integrated both their empathic gifts and the fierce self-protection those gifts require. Jung called this emergence the birth of the sovereign empath, and it represents a fundamental transformation in how you relate to yourself and others. The sovereign empath Jung described isn't someone who's built walls or shut down their sensitivity. You don't heal by becoming less empathic. You heal by becoming empathic toward yourself with the same intensity you've given to others. You learn to feel your own needs as clearly as you feel everyone else's. You learn to honor your own boundaries as carefully as you honor other people's comfort. You learn to witness your own pain with the same tender presence you offer to people who are suffering. This transformation requires what Jung called the integration of your inner witness, developing a part of yourself that can observe your empathic patterns with compassion instead of judgment. You begin noticing the moments when you automatically attune to someone else's emotions while ignoring your own. When you adjust your behavior to manage someone else's discomfort while bypassing your own. When you make excuses for treatment that hurts because understanding why someone behaves badly feels more comfortable than setting a boundary. The sovereign empath doesn't judge these patterns. She recognizes them as old programming that served a purpose once but no longer serves her evolution. She thanks her empathic system for trying to keep her safe through hypervigilance and accommodation, and then she consciously chooses different responses. Responses that honor her own emotional reality as much as anyone else's. Jung developed a practice he called empathic mirroring, where you learn to give yourself exactly what you've been hoping others would give you. Let me walk you through it because this is where your actual healing begins. When you notice yourself longing for this person to reach out and tell you they miss you, you pause and ask, what is that longing really about? Usually it's about wanting to feel seen, valued, thought about, important to someone. And instead of waiting for them to provide that feeling, you give it to yourself. You reach out to yourself. You tell yourself, I see you. I know how hard this is. I'm here. I'm not leaving. At first, this feels ridiculous. It feels like trying to tickle yourself or laugh at your own joke. Your system is so conditioned to seek external validation that internal validation registers as fake, insufficient, not the real thing. But Jung found that if empaths persist with this practice, something extraordinary happens. You begin developing an internal relationship with yourself that's so nourishing, so present, so unconditionally accepting that external relationships shift from need to preference. You stop desperately scanning other people for signs of approval because you've learned to approve of yourself. You stop needing someone to understand you because you've learned to understand yourself. You stop seeking someone to choose you because you've finally chosen yourself. And from this place of internal sovereignty, you become magnetic in completely new ways. Here's what this looks like in practice. You wake up at 3 a.m. feeling them again. But instead of spiraling into, why can't I stop this? You pause. You place your hand on your own chest. You feel the ache there. And instead of judging yourself for still feeling them, you say, I see you're hurting. I'm here. What do you need right now? And you listen. Maybe you need to cry. Maybe you need to write. Maybe you need to get up and move your body. Maybe you just need to be held by yourself until the wave passes. You learn to parent yourself through the pain instead of abandoning yourself in it. You learn that the goal isn't to stop feeling. The goal is to stay present with yourself while you're feeling. Because that's what you've been seeking all along. Not someone to take the pain away. Someone to stay with you while you're in pain. And you can be that person for yourself. Jung observed that sovereign empaths attract entirely different quality of people into their lives. The emotionally unavailable stop registering as potential partners because you've healed the wound that made their unavailability feel like home. The people who take without giving back lose their appeal because you're no longer trying to earn love through depletion. The users, the takers, the ones who saw your empathic nature as something to exploit, they can sense you're no longer available for that dynamic, and they simply stop appearing in your field. And the people who are capable of reciprocity, who've done their own work, who can match your depth without being overwhelmed by it, who can receive your empathic gifts without exploiting them, they suddenly become visible to you in ways they never were before. Not because they weren't there all along, but because you weren't available to see them. You were too busy trying to make unavailable people available to notice the ones who were already showing up. But here's what Jung found most beautiful about sovereign empaths. They don't just transform their romantic relationships. They transform every relationship. Your friendships become more authentic because you're no longer performing to maintain connection. Your family dynamics shift because you're no longer absorbing everyone's dysfunction to keep peace. Your work relationships improve because you're no longer overextending yourself to prove your value. The sovereign empath carries what Jung called tempered radiance. Your light still shines. Your gifts are still potent. You're still deeply feeling and perceptive. But now you're boundaried. Now you're discerning. Now you offer your empathic presence as a choice rather than a compulsion. You've learned that the highest expression of empathy isn't feeling everything all the time. It's consciously choosing when to open your empathic channels and when to close them for your own protection and restoration. This sovereignty doesn't happen overnight. It's built through thousands of small choices where you prioritize your own needs, even when it feels selfish, where you disappoint someone else to honor yourself, where you let someone be uncomfortable with your boundaries instead of contorting yourself to make them comfortable, where you choose solitude over connection that depletes you, where you risk being called cold or distant or changed, because maintaining your peace matters more than maintaining your reputation as the understanding one. Each of these choices is an act of self-love. Each boundary is a love letter to yourself. Each moment you choose differently is evidence that you're healing, not by becoming less sensitive, but by becoming sensitively protective of your own heart. Let me give you an example of what this looks like. A friend calls you in crisis. The old you would have dropped everything, absorbed their distress, stayed on the phone for 2 hours trying to fix their feelings, and hung up completely depleted. The sovereign you says, "I can hear you're going through something really hard. I have 15 minutes right now. Can we talk then? Or would it be better if we schedule a time tomorrow when I have more capacity?" You're still showing up. You're still caring. But you're showing up in a way that honors both of you. Or someone texts you and you don't respond immediately because you're in the middle of something. The old you would have felt guilty, anxious, worried about disappointing them. The sovereign you recognizes that your time is yours to allocate. That being available doesn't mean being available all the time. That people who actually respect you will understand when you need space. Or this person you couldn't have shows up again after months of silence wanting to see how you are. The old you would have jumped at the crumbs, made yourself available, hoped this meant they were coming back. The sovereign you recognize as breadcrumbing when you see it and you say, "I've moved on, I wish you well." Not because you're trying to play games or make them want you, but because you finally want yourself more than you want someone who couldn't choose you. This is the sovereignty Jung was talking about. Not walls, not coldness, not becoming unavailable yourself, but fierce, loving protection of your own energy, your own heart, your own peace. If you're ready to step into this sovereignty, if you're tired of being everyone's emotional support system while your own heart remains unattended, share in the comments what's one boundary you're ready to set. Sometimes declaring it to witnesses who understand is what makes it real. Carl Jung made a profound observation about what happens when empaths complete the healing journey from impossible love. He found that they don't just recover, they undergo what he called psychological metamorphosis, emerging with capacities they never possessed before the breaking. The pain wasn't punishment. It was the cocoon that made transformation possible. Jung documented specific gifts that emerge in empaths who fully process impossible love instead of trying to bypass or transcend it prematurely. And I want you to understand what's waiting for you on the other side of this pain. Because right now, in the middle of it, it feels like you're just surviving. But what you're actually doing is evolving into someone you've never been before. The first gift Jung identified is what he called emotional immunity. Not immunity in the sense of no longer feeling, but immunity in the sense of no longer being destabilized by what you feel. You develop the capacity to feel the full spectrum of human emotion, yours and others, without losing your center, without being swept away, without mistaking intensity for truth. Before this healing, your empathic system had no filter. You absorbed everything and everyone, unable to distinguish between your emotions and the emotions of people around you. Someone walked into a room in a bad mood and suddenly you felt anxious without knowing why. Someone you loved was struggling and you carried their pain in your body like it was yours. You couldn't tell where you ended and other people began. But the impossible love forced you to develop what Jung called conscious feeling. You learned to ask, is this mine or is this theirs? Is this a feeling I need to process or is this a feeling I'm picking up from someone else's unprocessed material? This discernment becomes a superpower that protects you from energetic overwhelm while maintaining your empathic sensitivity. You'll notice it happening. You'll be in a conversation with someone who's anxious and you'll feel their anxiety trying to enter your system. But instead of automatically absorbing it like you used to, you'll feel it hit your boundary and you'll make a conscious choice. Do I want to take this on? Or can I hold space for them without carrying their emotion? And most of the time, you'll choose to stay sovereign. to care without caring, to support without absorbing. The second gift Jung identified is self-generated wholeness. Before this love, you unconsciously believed that you needed someone else to complete you, to activate your best self, to give you permission to be fully expressed. The impossible love shattered this illusion in the most painful way possible. You learned that you could be completely yourself, offer your full depth, express your entire range of emotional and creative capacity, and still not be chosen. And in that devastating recognition, you discovered something revolutionary. Your wholeness isn't contingent on being chosen by someone else. You started developing parts of yourself that you'd been waiting for someone else to activate. The creativity you only accessed when someone was witnessing you, you learned to access it alone. The vulnerability you only felt safe expressing when someone was holding space, you learned to hold space for yourself. The aliveness you thought required someone else's presence, you discovered it arising from your own internal relationship with being alive. Maybe you started writing again, or painting, or dancing in your living room at midnight, or taking yourself on dates, or having deep conversations with yourself in the mirror, or creating things just because they wanted to be created, not because anyone would see them. You became your own witness, your own audience, your own validation, and you realized, I don't need someone else to make me interesting. I'm interesting on my own. Jung called this phenomenon self-actualization through abandonment. What everyone thinks will destroy you actually reconstructs you at a more authentic level. You're no longer performing a version of yourself that you think will make you lovable. You're simply being yourself and trusting that the people meant for you will recognize and value what you authentically are. The third gift is what Jung termed sacred discernment. You develop an almost supernatural ability to recognize emotional availability and authenticity in others within moments of meeting them. Your empathic system, which used to be indiscriminate in who it opened to, becomes exquisitely calibrated to distinguish between people who can match your depth and people who are attracted to your depth, but incapable of reciprocating it. You stop giving everyone access to your heart just because they show interest. You stop making excuses for behavior that doesn't align with words. You stop trying to love potential into reality. You become someone who can appreciate what is without needing to transform it into what you wish it could be. And this discernment protects you from repeating the pattern of impossible love while keeping you open to possible love when it genuinely appears. You'll meet someone and within 5 minutes you'll know, this person is emotionally available. Or, this person talks a good game, but can't actually show up. You'll sense the difference between someone who's genuinely interested and someone who's just curious about your intensity, between someone who wants to know you and someone who wants to be healed by you, between someone who can receive your depth and someone who will be overwhelmed by it. And you'll trust yourself. You'll trust what you sense. You'll trust what you feel, because you've learned that your empathic system isn't the problem. The problem was that you weren't listening to it. You were overriding your own knowing to give people chances they hadn't earned, to see potential that wasn't there, to believe words instead of actions. But perhaps the most profound gift Jung identified is what he called love without attachment. This isn't detachment in the cold, defended sense. This is love that exists independently of outcome, reciprocation, or relationship status. You learn to love people's essence without needing to possess their presence, to celebrate who they are without requiring them to be yours, to appreciate what they've taught you without needing them to stay in your life to validate that the teaching mattered. This capacity makes you free in ways most people never experience. You can love deeply without losing yourself. You can connect profoundly without creating entanglement. You can honor someone's impact on your life without making them responsible for your continued well-being. You become someone who loves like the ocean loves the shore, completely present when the tide brings you together, completely whole when it draws you apart. And here's what this looks like with this person you couldn't have. You might still think about them sometimes. You might still feel tenderness when their name comes up. You might still recognize that they mattered, that they changed you, that they activated something in you that needed to be activated. But you're no longer waiting for them. You're no longer hoping they'll come back. You're no longer checking to see if they're thinking about you. Because you've learned that love doesn't require their participation to be real, and your peace doesn't require their return to be permanent. Jung believed these gifts represent evolutionary consciousness in action. Most humans love conditionally, transactionally, with hidden contracts about what they expect in return. But empaths who've been through the fire of impossible love learn to love the way the divine loves, unconditionally, without agenda, celebrating existence for its own sake rather than for its benefit to them. These gifts don't eliminate your capacity for committed partnership. If anything, they prepare you for partnership at depths most people never access. Because now you're not seeking someone to complete you. You're seeking someone to witness your completeness, to share the journey with someone who's also already whole, to build something together from overflow rather than need. The person you couldn't have gave you these gifts, not through their love but through their absence. They showed you where you still needed to grow, what you still needed to heal, who you still needed to become. And if you allow this process to complete itself instead of rushing into new relationships to avoid the discomfort, you'll emerge as someone you've never been before. Someone who carries both profound sensitivity and fierce sovereignty. Someone who can love with your whole heart while maintaining your whole self. Comment below with just the word transformed if you're beginning to see that this pain wasn't random. If you're starting to understand that you were being prepared for something you couldn't have accessed any other way. Carl Jung spent his later years reflecting on the purpose of suffering in human development, and he concluded something that will transform how you see everything you've been through. He found that impossible love serves an evolutionary function in consciousness. It appears in the lives of people whose souls are ready for initiation into deeper levels of authentic relating. You weren't randomly selected for this pain. You were specifically called to it because your consciousness is capable of transformation that most people never attempt. Jung observed that the majority of humans love in unconscious patterns. They choose partners based on unexamined childhood wounds. They stay in relationships that don't serve their growth because the familiar feels safer than the unknown. They love transactionally, conditionally, with unspoken contracts about what they expect in return. And they move through their entire lives never questioning whether there might be other ways to love, other depths of connection available to those willing to do the psychological work required to access them. But people who experience impossible love, Jung found, are being called out of unconscious relating into what he termed conscious love. The pain of loving someone you couldn't have forces you to examine every assumption you've held about what love is, what it requires, what it promises, what you deserve. It strips away the illusions, the fantasies, the projections, until you're left standing in raw reality, forced to decide whether you'll retreat into protective numbness or expand into vulnerable authenticity. This initiation isn't gentle. It's not supposed to be. Jung understood that consciousness doesn't evolve through comfort. It evolves through crisis, through being broken open so completely that you can't reconstruct yourself the way you were. The impossible love was designed to shatter your old relationship template so thoroughly that you have no choice but to build a new one from the ground up, with awareness instead of conditioning as its foundation. Think about who you were before this love, how you approached relationships, what you believed about your worth, what you were willing to accept, what you thought love meant. You probably believed that if you just loved someone hard enough, they'd eventually see your value. You probably thought that understanding someone's wounds made you obligated to stay while they hurt you. You probably confused intensity with intimacy, chemistry with compatibility, potential with reality. And now think about who you're becoming through this healing. The patterns you're recognizing, the boundaries you're setting, the self-betrayals you're no longer willing to commit, the quality of presence you're learning to give yourself. You're not the same person. The impossible love killed the old version and is birthing someone new. Jung called this process death and rebirth, and he believed it was the core pattern of psychological transformation. Something in you has to die for something new to be born. The part of you that believed your empathic gifts obligated you to accept less than you deserve, that version had to die. The part of you that thought loving someone meant abandoning yourself to meet their needs, she had to die. The part of you that made your worth contingent on being chosen by someone else, she had to die. And in their place, something is emerging. A self who knows her value isn't up for debate. A self who can love without losing herself. A self who chooses connection that honors her rather than connection that depletes her. A self who understands that her sensitivity is sacred and should only be shared with people who recognize it as such. This emergence is still happening. You're still in process. Some days it feels like you're making progress. Other days it feels like you're back at the beginning, crying over someone who left months ago, wondering if you'll ever stop feeling them. But Jung would tell you that healing isn't linear, it's spiral. You circle back to the same wounds at deeper levels, integrating layers you weren't ready to process before, releasing patterns you couldn't see clearly until now. The person you loved impossibly will probably never know the role they played in your transformation. They'll never understand that their inability to be with you catalyzed your becoming someone more whole than you've ever been. And that's okay. Jung found that the people who serve as our greatest teachers are often the ones who have no idea they're teaching us anything. They're just living their lives, making their choices, following their paths, while unknowingly serving as mirrors that show us exactly what we need to see about ourselves. Your healing isn't about them anymore. It stopped being about them the moment you started doing this work. It's about you now. It's about honoring the journey you've been on. It's about recognizing that every tear was sacred water feeding growth you couldn't see happening. It's about trusting that the pain had purpose, even when the purpose wasn't clear. It's about believing that you're being prepared for love you can't imagine yet, with someone who can actually meet you. Jung believed that souls who go through this initiation become what he called love revolutionaries. Not in dramatic visible ways, but through quiet demonstration of what it looks like to love consciously. To maintain empathic gifts while holding fierce boundaries. To feel everything without being destroyed by what you feel. To connect deeply without creating entanglement. To honor others' journeys without sacrificing your own. Every person who completes this transformation raises the collective consciousness around what love can become. You're not just healing yourself. You're contributing to the evolution of how humans learn to love. Your willingness to feel this fully, to break this completely, to rebuild this consciously, creates permission for others to do the same. Your healing becomes medicine for people you'll never meet. Think about it. Every time you choose yourself over someone who can't choose you, you're modeling a new way. Every time you set a boundary that protects your peace, you're showing others that boundaries aren't selfish. They're sacred. Every time you refuse to settle for crumbs, you're demonstrating that empaths don't have to accept less to be loved. Every time you love yourself as fiercely as you've loved others, you're proving that self-love isn't narcissism, it's survival. The world needs sovereign empaths. People who feel deeply but aren't destroyed by what they feel. People who love openly but maintain their center. People who give generously but never deplete themselves. People who see others clearly without losing sight of themselves. You're becoming one of those people. And the world will be different because you had the courage to break open and rebuild consciously, instead of shutting down and protecting defensively. If you've stayed with me through this entire exploration, I want to honor something in you. You have the courage to look at your deepest wound and ask what it came to teach you. That willingness to find meaning in suffering is what Jung called the mark of a soul ready for transformation. You're not just surviving this impossible love. You're allowing it to forge you into someone who will never again settle for crumbs when you deserve the whole feast. And here's what I know about you now, after everything we've explored together. You're ready for a different kind of love. Not the dramatic, chaotic, uncertain love that kept you anxious and hyper-vigilant. Not the love that required you to abandon yourself to maintain connection. Not the love that felt like work and effort and proving and performing. You're ready for the kind of love that feels like coming home to yourself. The kind where someone sees your depth and isn't intimidated by it. Where someone receives your empathic gifts and honors them instead of exploiting them. Where someone shows up consistently, not just when it's convenient. Where words align with actions. Where you don't have to guess how they feel because they tell you. Where you don't have to manage their emotions because they manage their own. Where you can be completely yourself, and that's exactly what they want. You're ready for someone who's done their own work, who knows their wounds and doesn't expect you to heal them, who takes responsibility for their emotional experience, who can hold space for your intensity without being overwhelmed, who can match your depth without drowning in it, who sees your sensitivity as sacred instead of excessive. You're ready for love that nourishes instead of depletes. that energizes instead of exhausts, that feels peaceful instead of chaotic, that creates safety instead of anxiety, that celebrates your growth instead of fearing it. And that love is coming, not because you manifested it or vibrated at the right frequency or did enough inner work to deserve it, but because you've become someone who can recognize it when it arrives. Someone who won't confuse intensity with intimacy anymore. Someone who won't mistake potential for reality. Someone who won't give your heart to someone who isn't qualified to hold it. The impossible love taught you what you don't want. Now you get to discover what you do want. And you get to build that from a place of wholeness instead of woundedness, from overflow instead of emptiness, from choice instead of need. I would be deeply honored if you would share in the comments what this impossible love taught you about yourself, about your worth, about the kind of love you're now ready to receive. Your story might be exactly what another empath needs to hear to keep going. Sometimes our healing becomes most powerful when we transform it into medicine for others. And if this has helped you see your heartbreak through a new lens, if you're beginning to understand that what felt like ending was actually beginning, I would love for you to subscribe so we can continue this journey together, exploring the deeper psychology of what it means to heal, to grow, to become more authentically ourselves through everything we experience. Please share this with another empath who needs to know that their capacity to feel everything isn't their flaw, it's their sacred gift. And that healing from impossible love doesn't mean shutting down, it means learning to love themselves as fiercely as they've loved others. Thank you for trusting me with your time, for having the courage to feel deeply in a world that often demands numbness, and for being willing to transform your pain into wisdom. Your empathic heart isn't broken. It's breaking open into its fullest, most sovereign expression, and the love that's coming for you, the love you're becoming ready for, will honor every piece of this journey that brought you here. Until we meet again in the next exploration of what it means to heal, to love, and to finally come home to yourself.